And then we jumped into a new series a few weeks ago now called Nehemiah and kind of courage for the moment. And here's what we've been saying, as we said that we as people, as individuals, as families, even as churches, we have moments that God places us into, and we have a decision to make on whether or not we're going to kind of face those moments with courage, whether we're going to lean into them and embrace those moments, or if we're going to kind of shrink back and face it with cowardice. And so we've been taking some time to really look at that. How do we embrace and have courage for the moment that God has put us in? And we've been looking at the life of Nehemiah, and at least a moment, kind of a snapshot of his life and his story, and how he set an amazing example of really embracing the moment with courage. And we've been talking about what that looks like. And maybe if you're just jumping in with us, let me give you a little review of what's going on. So this guy named Nehemiah is kind of leading the charge with a group of people to rebuild the ruins of his kind of hometown, the place where his people are from in Jerusalem. And so he initially kind of did that from afar in the Persian Empire, and he has set out, made all the preparations, and kind of led a group of people to rebuild these walls and gates of Jerusalem to help the people of God have an identity, to have security. And this was a passion and a burden on his heart. And the people just responded amazingly. And we looked at that a little bit here over the last few weeks. We looked at that last week on how the people kind of jumped in and everybody did their part. We looked before, the week before, about kind of the waiting phase of planning and preparing. And so if maybe you're here for the first time and you're in a place where you're kind of waiting to move forward on something God is asking you to do, maybe check that message out, and then check out what it looks like to be a part of something that God is doing, as we talked about that briefly last weekend. And then what we want to do today is really look at the reality of kind of what happens when we embrace with courage the moment God has placed us in, when we start to have traction in that and move towards it, right? If there's a vision in our lives, right, whether that's personal or corporate, and we start to see kind of momentum build and we start to see things change and happen, nearly always there's going to be a reaction, a response from the people around us. Because what's happening is we're upsetting the order, kind of the norm of how things are balanced in kind of the status quo. And whenever you start to move things and change things, there's a reaction, there's a response because of that. And in fact, the Apostle Paul would say something that this verse has stuck with me kind of forever, as I remember reading it for the first time and being struck by it. Here's what he would say about some of this change in 2 Timothy 3. He says, in fact, everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. He just straight up says it. Hey, if you're going to move towards God, if you want to see a vision of your own life changing, if you want to be a force for good and for help and godliness in this world, it is inevitable, it is guaranteed that when you move towards those kinds of efforts, you're going to have opposition, right? It's just an absolute given, according to Paul here, right? And there's some reasons for that, and we want to see some of those reasons and kind of how they play out here in this story as we're going to unpack this here in a minute. But I want us to see some of how this works. D.L. Moody says this. I love this quote. He says, the best work usually meets the strongest opposition. And these factors kind of bump into each other. And I want us to see a little bit of how this works. At least this is how it plays out in my head. Whenever a person or a group of people begin to move things, they begin to make changes, they want to see the things around them affected. They're making changes internally, right? There's momentum for good that's starting to play out, and it's starting to reverberate out, and people are understanding and knowing about it. What begins to happen is like we said, is there are other people, other individuals or groups that begin to take notice of that situation, and they observe it, and they they start to recognize, wait a minute, something's happening here. And there begins to be a reaction back because of it. And it's this opposition that we're going to see in the story today. And we're going to see I think we're going to see at least one example of why that plays out. And here's what I want us to see as we go into the story. We can kind of look for it. Is I think there's at least a few reasons why we get this kind of oppositional response, right? This kickback, this persecution. Because we can start to understand that when if I'm a person, if I'm an individual that wants to make a stand in my own journey, not even publicly, it's not even that we're pronouncing it to the world. If I make a decision, let's say, to have integrity in the workplace, I'm not going to cut corners, I'm not going to cheat, I'm not going to do kind of what everybody else does. What's going to happen is when I start to make decisions like that, what happens is there's an exposure that happens, and it shines light into the darkness of other people. Not intentionally, that wasn't the purpose of it, to show and expose the darkness necessarily that was happening here. This person is just making a decision for light. When somebody says, hey, I'm going to pursue purity in my life. I don't want to pursue a sexual relationship before marriage, or I want to maybe I've been down that road and I want to make a change. Instantly, the people around you are going to look at you and they're going to mock you for that decision. If you want to move something and do something different, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to have some form of opposition back, some kickback that plays out. And there's some reasons. Often the reasons are this exposure of darkness that happens from this group, right, where there's going to be opposition that kicks in. And it's not necessarily that these people are, right, they're just like you and me. And by the way, I've been on this side of this conversation before, right? Some of you know this about me. You knew that I didn't grow up in church, and I grew up as an atheist. I literally was the guy mocking the other people for the good they were doing. What do you believe again? Tell me how it works again, how you have some God that created everything. I was the guy mocking people. The Apostle Paul was the guy persecuting people. So it's not that, right, if you're this person here, somebody drug you to church today, it's not that you're doomed per se, right? This can be part of some of our stories. But the reality is that there's this interplay between light and somebody who's kind of living in darkness, and this opposition starts to kick through, often because of this person is being exposed. Or here's another piece, is there's a fear. There's a massive fear, and that fear is a fear of loss, right? A fear of loss, a loss of control or a loss of power. And the fear sometimes looks like this, that as somebody is beginning to move, and this is going to be how it plays out in our story, as somebody starts to gain traction, especially in a group, and they start to move, the fear is that these people are going to grow in their influence, and if they grow in their influence, then we may shrink in ours. And it's the fear of losing power or influence or control that creates this attack almost in a competitive way, right? Even if that's not the desire or the heartbeat of the person that's pursuing the good. Massive. Understanding that this thing is real is so helpful for us as we start to lean into making any kind of changes in our own personal lives as we move towards Jesus, or even as we move forward as a church, right? Or if you make decisions as a family, that we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to make decisions based on our convictions. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's towards godliness, there's a possibility that you're going to bring mockery or persecution upon yourself. I remember a guy saying that he was talking to his accountant one time, and he had given a ton of money to the church, right? And his accountant was mocking him for giving too much and telling him he was foolish for doing it. It doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, it's unreal. Any spot that we start to move it upsets the status quo, the homeostasis, the balance, and somebody's going to be affected by it. Right? Let's look at our story and see how it plays out. It's actually a pretty interesting part of how this begins to play. And remember last time, if you were here last week, they were really beginning to pick up momentum. The people were going after the work. Great things were beginning to move. The walls were getting built. And now we begin to see some of the opposition as it plays out. And here's what we see in Nehemiah 4. It says, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, what are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble burned as they are? Right? So this guy, Sanballat, he is a governor. He's an overseer of Samaria, right? This nearby kind of province area. And he had a little realm of power that he was kind of in charge of, right? And as he looks and sees this wave of momentum building, as Nehemiah and the Jewish people are beginning to rebuild out of the absolute ruins of what was in existence, he sees that this thing is going to bring opposition potentially to him. He might lose his influence or his power in this situation. So what does he do? He begins to ridicule it. He begins to attack it. He begins to mock it and say some of these things. Can they do it? You can't do this. You can't rebuild, right? And this is the kind of thing that we're going to get if you begin to pursue movement or change in your life. And we might even bump into some of this as a church. We might even, you guys, you can't, what are you doing over there? You can't do that. You can't make those changes. Why would, right? And there might be some attacks corporately that we might experience. I've seen this happen, and it's kind of insane. But you would experience this personally as well. Go ahead and try it. Try to make some changes and move towards something, and you just kind of watch it. Watch what your friend group does. Hey guys, I feel like we maybe been drinking too much. We're not going to drink anymore. I think I'm going to move away from and see how that response is. Right? I really feel like I want to pursue purity and not. I don't want to live this way anymore. By the way, I went through this. Right? I didn't grow up in the church. I was in college. Right? Fill in all the blanks with whatever normal people in college who don't know Jesus are doing. And that's the stuff I was doing, right? And so I began to tell my friends, hey, this Jesus thing, I'm in on it. And I think it means I have to live differently, which means I'm not gonna be doing this anymore. No more clubs, no more girls. I'm gonna stop cussing, kind of. I'll try hard, right? Some things take longer than others, right? Right? And some friends were like, what are you doing? We're having fun. You're not fun anymore, right? You are a buzzkill, right? And that's going to be the reaction a little bit. This is what's happening on a corporate level here with Nehemiah. Sanballat is looking and saying, hey, this thing could be a threat to me. This thing could expose me. This thing could cause me to lose my position, my power, my influence, because if this gets traction, it could become bigger and stronger than what I am, and I'm threatened by that. Rather than seeing this as a good thing, that a community is being restored, that people are being helped, that good things are happening, all he can see is the evil. All he could see is his own impact that it might have on him out of fear. Right? And whenever we're reacting out of only fear, we start to do weird things like this, right? And it goes on. He's got this sidekick, Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, what are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their walls of stones. This guy is like the sidekick to Sanballat, right? And he makes this kind of a dumb, frankly, kind of a dumb comment. He's like, yeah, even a fox could break those walls. Lame, right? And you're like, who is this guy, right? He's kind of like the sidekick to Sanballat, and both of these guys were kind of overseeing areas. Tobiah might have been under the leadership of Sanballat, and so they begin to get into it, and he's jumping in, and he's just kind of kicking it on these guys, and throwing shade at what they're doing. And here's how Nehemiah and his response plays out. Here's what we see in the following verses in 4-6. Nehemiah says, "Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity." He says, "Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half of its height, for the people worked with all of their heart. Right? Nehemiah is, right, of course, frustrated by this. These people right here are, right, they are spending themselves in a worthy endeavor. They're sacrificing time and energy and sweat, kind of sweat, blood, and tears, you name it, in making this thing happen. They're giving the best of themselves. And while they're pouring themselves out, suffering, right, whenever you do this, whenever you give yourself to a great cause, you kind of you start strong, and then eventually you kind of start to run out of steam. And in the middle of that, they're throwing these insults at the people of God. And I love what Nehemiah does. He doesn't fight back right away, right? What he does primarily, not that he would never have an interchange with these guys. Some of the story he does, but what he mainly does is he takes this reality and he goes to God with it, right? And this is what we should do. He goes to God with it. He prays, and he goes and says, "God, you know what's happening. And here's the beauty, you see the situation. You see what we're doing. You understand the motives of the hearts. You understand what's happening here in the midst of people being poured out." And he brings that to God himself, right? And guys, this is huge. And here's, when we're in the middle of this, when people are looking at us and they're pointing fingers and saying, "You're never going to do that," or "Why would you do that?" or "You think you're better than me? You think you're better than our family? You want to do what?" Right? You want to go to college? You think you're different than us? Right? When you start to have that kind of opposition kickback, what we want to do is, rather than fight back or defend ourselves, we want to do our very best to find a way to get that to God directly. God, you see the situation, you know. Jesus would say, pray for your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. I want to bring that stuff to God. He is able to humble. And guys, let me just say that I imagine at some point somebody prayed for me when I was somebody's enemy. When I was on this side of the coin here, I imagine somebody was praying for me even when I was their opposition. The person isn't the enemy. Okay, that's huge. The person isn't the enemy, not really. Even though in the story it feels that way for sure. The reality is, we know today, right, because of what Jesus has done and how the church works, and we understand the spiritual reality, the people that are in opposition, they're not the enemy. The enemy is the devil. The enemy it's a spiritual battle that's playing out. And so I want to pray for these people who are opposing me. Okay? They're just like you and me. Maybe their story plays out the way my story played out. Here's what God did in my life, right? When I was in a prideful place and I was in opposition to others, God slowly but surely broke me. He humbled me. When I was at a place where I couldn't see that I had a need for God, God tore down my defenses lovingly and systematically until I was at a point in my life where I had to say, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know how to help myself, and I don't know why I should get out of bed in the morning anymore. Now I'm open. I'm open to change. I'm open to something different. And guys, when we're being opposed, we want to see that kind of vision even for the person who is opposing us. I want to take that to God directly. I want to pray for those who persecute me, right? Okay, and then the next piece is this, right? It says, so we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all of their heart, right? And then I want to get back to work. Here's the next piece. Get back to work. This is just as challenging as this one, right? Get back to work. Because here's the thing. When people start opposing, we might have the instinct to say, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe this is too hard. I don't know if, I remember when I was making a decision for Jesus, counting the cost of it, because I just knew if I said yes to Jesus, that all this stuff was going to change in my life. And I kind of knew that this was going to happen. Like, as soon as I rip the Band-Aid and make that call, I'm going to bring this upon myself because I'm going to end up wanting to change. My life is going to change, and I'm going to want it too. Do I want all that that's going to bring with it? So there's and this is where courage for the moment is so huge. It's not just doing the work. It's doing the work in the midst of opposition sometimes. It's doing the work in the midst of mockery. When people don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. When people are frustrated or they feel fear or they feel exposed because you are moving forward in your life and you're moving towards what God wants you to pursue, godliness, right? So I want to go to God with that, and then I want to make sure I don't give up on the work because of the opposition. That's kind of the goal of why the opposition is happening. I want to stay the course, and I want to persevere in it and see it all the way through, right? Some of you are wired that way. Some of you are like, you know what? When I get a little opposition, it makes me dig in a little deeper, right? That's great. Some of us aren't wired that way. And when we start to feel like we're opposed, we start to wonder and doubt, right? And so the key thing is when we begin to get this opposition, I want to get back to what it is God is asking me to do. And I want that to build my resolve. And I think these two things build upon one another that Nehemiah is modeling for us, right? He prays, he asks God to move and to help, and then he gets himself and the people back to the work as they lean into what it is God was doing. Now, the story continues here, and let me walk you through some of what's happening in the rest of it. Nehemiah 4:7 says, but when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. Again, but we prayed to our God, go to God, prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there's so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. A few pieces I want us to see here. A few pieces. What we're seeing play out is there hits this moment where the opposition is intense. It has gotten even stronger. The initial wave of persecution didn't stop it. The people doubled down, right? Their impact is growing. Here's what their fear is that, man, these people they're expanding, they're going to get even stronger. This whole thing is becoming even more than we thought it was going to be, right? It's growing out this way. As that growth continues, the opposition doubles down, right? And now the threat is real. The people are tired. They hit this fatigue that we mentioned. And guys, everything that is worth doing in godliness, in bringing good to a community, right, in seeing change play out, it's always a little bit hard. If it was easy, it would have been done already, right? If it was easy, anybody could. If it was easy, it would have been accomplished. It's the reason it's not done or changed is because it's hard, and it's the kind of hard. It's the kind of hard that we struggle with. Let me talk to this a minute. American strength, the way that we view strength in our culture in America, is we view strength through fast, intense bursts. A 100-meter dash, and at one max rep bench press, right? It's how much can you max and go fast and blow up in a short amount of time? Boom, right? Power. The Middle East, hear this, the Middle Eastern view of strength is very different. The Middle Eastern, right, and this is the Middle Eastern view of strength goes like this. It's how long can you endure? How long can you last in the midst of suffering? Here's really the question, can you be the last one standing? That kind of strength test is different. Different cultures magnify and value different things. The Middle Eastern culture magnifies and values endurance and long suffering, the ability to hang in there as long as possible, right? That's what's needed. It's that brand of strength, we could say. It's that kind of resolve that's needed to endure and to make it through work like this. Right? It's the reality. And most things that involve godliness and change in our personal lives, in our communities, involve a long-suffering kind of strength. Under pressure, under opposition, under our own internal weakness. It's kind of like, how long can you hang on the bar, right? While people are making fun of you and punching you in the throat, okay? Right? It's that kind of strength. This is the thing that these guys are going through. They're in the midst of fatigue, and they're being opposed even more deeply. And I love what Nehemiah does here. He leads them. He doesn't just say to them, hey, let's have faith. God will take care of us. It's faith over fear. Don't worry that this is. What he says is he's praying. He's going to God. And then what he's doing is he posts a guard day and night to meet this threat. He's realistic about the very real possibility, like, hey, these people might do something crazy. This thing might get really hard. There's a realism built into the conversation, and sometimes we have to face that. Like, if you refuse to cut corners, you really might lose your job. Like that kind of reality. If you say, hey, I'm not gonna have sex with my girlfriend anymore or boyfriend anymore, you really might lose your boyfriend or girlfriend. If you say, I'm done drinking, I'm done using, your friend group may go away. These things are real. It's not, well, I trusted God, faith over fear, and nothing bad's going to happen. That's not how it works. That's just not how it works, right? Sometimes it works that way. Most of the time, there's a real reaction and response. There's a kickback, And it's not, listen, the prayer is not this. The prayer is not God lessen the kickback. The prayer is not God make it easier. Here's the prayer. The prayer is God make me more like you to be able to stand up under the difficulty. God, strengthen me on the inside to be able to meet the opposition that comes. See, we said this nearly every week. The key is we become different in this journey. We become different. It's the whole point. God changes us as he uses us. And in the midst of opposition, in the midst of fatigue, in the midst of mockery, our finding long suffering and finding strength as we build a dependence on God and focus on what he's asking us to do, we change in the process, right? And we see that playing out. And in the story here with Nehemiah, they're running out of steam. The intensity is growing. And we feel that this thing is getting very, very challenging. This is also our enemy said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and we'll kill them and put an end to the work. Real threats from real people in a real situation. Goes on, then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Wherever you turn, they will attack us, right? So now this message of fear and difficulty becomes the focal point, right? And this is what can happen. Is now the focal point isn't what we're doing, what God has called us to do, the impact that's supposed to have and will have in the future. Now the locus of, right, the focus moves over here into fear. And now it's what everybody is staring at is this now distracting force. Not that they shouldn't pay attention to it, but it becomes a little bit of the center. It says, then the Jews who lived near them came and told it, right, here we go, here's the next one. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall and at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, hey, don't be afraid of them, right? Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. Right? So Nehemiah is pulling them. He's being honest and realistic. We're setting up guards. Right? We're recognizing this is a real thing. But he says we're not going to operate and live in a place of trembling and fear. We're going to remember the Lord. Right? He's the one who directed us to this. We're going to keep our focus here. Goes on, from that day on, half of my men did the work, listen to this, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armors. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. He says, but the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out. We are widely separated from each other all along the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. Right? So these guys, they're operating in the midst of this opposition, this difficulty, and now a real threat to their physical safety. Here's the thing. They don't look at that threat and say, man, never mind. This is getting scary and hard. We're going to go home. What do? They kind of prepare and they deal with it honestly, and they get back to the work, right? They administrate through how we should make sure this thing remains safe as we continue forward on it, and they fight to make sure they finish what they set out to do. So it says, so we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out, right? And this was the whole idea is that, right, they're fighting together even until dark. At that time, I also said to the people, Have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night, so they can serve as guards by night and workers by day. These are people that are all in. Neither I nor my brothers nor my men nor the guards with me took off our clothes. That's interesting. Which had his weapon even when he went for water, right? They're all in, and they are almost in a kind of a wartime mentality here during this last bit as they finish the work. When we look at how this thing plays out and the lengths that they would go to see the walls rebuilt, man, it's inspiring. It's inspiring. They believed this. They had conviction around it. And they even when faced with opposition and threats to their physical safety, were willing to stand up under a very difficult situation. Difficult physically, difficult emotionally, difficult in that it affected all parts of their life. And again, this rhythm of going back to God, getting back to work would be a theme of what they would have to lean into in the midst of fatigue, right, and the loss of their safety. Say, Ryan, what do we do with all this? Here's a few things. One, what I got to know, what I need to know is if I'm here, if you're a person that you know God is asking you to move into a place of godliness. He's asking you to move towards something. It could be personal, it could be your family, that could be even us as a church. We need to absolutely understand that some of this is going to happen. It's okay. It's been happening for thousands of years. It's not new. Not everyone is going to like what you're doing. Listen, not everybody's going to like what we're doing. Not everybody's going to agree with every decision we make about the building that we're going to move into. Not everybody's going to be excited that there's hundreds of people that are finding Jesus. It's okay. It's okay. When you make those moves personally, or we move corporately into, we have to have it as a default reality that somebody's not gonna like what I'm trying to do. And if I expect 100% of people to be excited about that, I'm gonna be discouraged. If I have this as a basic expectation that that's going to play out, it doesn't shock me. It's not disillusioning. It doesn't discourage me because I kind of knew it was going to happen. Maybe didn't know where it was going to come from, but I knew it was going to happen. Right? So step one, I got to know if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get this. I want to know when I do this and I begin to run into it, I want to make sure I grab hold of these two principles. Right? So here's the thing. Courage for the moment. I could look and say, God's asking me to move into a situation in my life. He's asking me to kind of take this ground in my life. And I want to recognize that this whole picture in learning the skill set of coming back to God and relying on Him and staying focused in the midst of opposition is going to be a skill set I'm going to need to build. That's part of doing this. I got to know that. Some of us never move. Listen, some of us never move into the moment because we simply don't want somebody to be mad. Let me tell you, you're going to make somebody mad. You're not trying to. It's not your goal. You're not trying to be a jerk to anybody. And even if you do the very best job, like Jesus did. Jesus did the best job. He did it perfectly. Some people are really, really mad at him. Okay? You've got to ask, and I've got to ask, am I going to be somebody that doesn't move into the moment because it felt scary? Or will I lean in and learn how to become something else? To become more than I am right now? To deal with something that's a little overwhelming at first glance? Did Nehemiah and his guys, did they know that this was, I don't know. I don't know that they knew it was going to play out like that. And I don't know how our future will play out. I don't know how your future will play out as you move to, but we know that this is going to be part of the equation. Finally, right, what if you're here? What if you're in this seat? What if you're operating as a troll right now? Right? We've all been there. It's not given that when we read a story in the Bible that we're the good guys. Sometimes we're the bad guys. I've been both many times. What I want to see is if I'm here and I'm the one persecuting and I'm the one attacking and I'm the one mocking, I'm the one squashing dreams, I'm the one reacting more about how this thing affects me than whether or not this is the right thing to do. What I want to do is recognize this moment of exposure is a gift. And I can look at it and I can say, oh, God, thank you for helping me to see my need for you, helping me to see that I'm living out of fear, not out of love. And I want to own that and be a part of the solution rather than attacking it. Beautiful story that God lays out for us here as we look at the life of Nehemiah. And what we can do is we can become people that have courage, that lean into the moment, or we can choose to be fearful and pull back. The decision's ours. But this is how it is. It's how it has been for thousands of years, and it's how it will be until we see Jesus face to face. The question is, who am I going to be in the story? I'm going to have the band come up. I'm going to pray for us. Ask God to give us courage in the midst of our moments. Lord, thank you that you envision what each of us can become and form into as we move towards seeing the person of Christ formed in us more and more. And Lord, we know that the circumstances of our lives present these moments, and you call us into them. Sometimes even into situations that feel fearful, feel scary. God, I pray that you would fill us with a courage, a willingness to go to you. Some of us are in the midst of that opposition right now. God, teach us to bring that to you and to stay focused on what it is you've called us to. Jesus, thanks that you modeled this perfectly. That when you were opposed, you didn't fight back. Lord, you entrusted yourself to your Father. And we want to do the same. Lord, give us courage to be people that look more and more like you here on this earth. Meet us here, even now.